Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Hovey. I'm the Director of Risk Services for the IMWCA, and I'd like to welcome you to the third and final session of our one-day safety university. We thank you all for attending and wish we were doing this in person. We miss seeing you and are hoping that we can certainly do this in person next October. So thank you for attending. And the topic today is the most common questions our loss control staff receives from our members. And Dean Shady is going to kick that off. He's our loss control manager, and I'll turn it over to Dean.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for the final session of the 2020 One Day Safety University. The topic we're going to cover today are the top 5 questions that we get from the members and our answers to those questions. Your presenters today are going to be your loss control team, myself, the loss control manager, Dean Shady, Stacy Griffin, loss control representative, Scott Smith, senior loss control representative, and Brad Chrisman, loss control representative. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Smith on how do you get employees to follow safety rules?
Well, good afternoon and welcome. This is a question we are frequently asked. And we'd like you to ask yourself this question. Do I want my employees and coworkers to get injured or die at work? Of course you don't. Safety should be treated as any other work rules such as tardiness, hours worked, and acceptable dress codes. The stakes are much higher regarding safety, far higher than just punching in late. Remember these rules of work and life. What you permit, you promote. What you allow, you encourage. What you condone, you own. And what you tolerate, you deserve. Commitment to safety starts at the very top levels of management. Leaders need to include safety as a core value and a key component of the organization's mission. It can't just be an add-on. It has to be part and parcel of everything your organization does. From job descriptions to policies to operating procedures, a focus on safety needs to be included. With firm commitment from the top, your department heads, mid-level managers, and frontline supervisors must be held accountable for following safety protocols and ensuring their employees do the same. Make adherence in promoting safety a component of the performance review of these key people. Frontline workers must also be held accountable for unsafe actions and personal behaviors. This includes possible disciplinary actions, even with injured employees, if applicable. Prioritizing safety and requiring accountability are key to establishing a proactive safety culture. So what are your legal obligations? IOSHA standards are state law that fall on the employer to enforce. Failure to implement and enforce can result in citations and significant fines. Put another way, providing a safe workplace and requiring employees to work safely is the law. It's not optional. Adherence to safety requirements are no different than operating permit conditions for water and wastewater plants. You would not flout those requirements, would you? Ignoring your safety obligations can lead to whistleblower or citizen complaints. These can result in regulatory fines and lawsuits. And in some cases, managers can be held criminally liable. When something tragic happens, such as an employee being seriously injured or killed on the job, it can have other wide-ranging negative impacts. The public may perceive your organization as out of control or at least poorly managed. You may be negatively portrayed in the media. This ends up on the internet, and in this day and age, that means in perpetuity. Employee morale may decrease, and employee turnover may increase. When hiring new people, some people may choose to not apply due to their negative perception of your workplace's stance on safety. They correctly see that this is a reflection on your management. And businesses may choose to not consider your community as a possible location to expand or relocate to. There is the financial impact of increased workers' compensation premiums. Work comp premiums can increase significantly based on the injuries that your employees incur. If you have serious injuries and/or a lot of injuries, your premium will increase. Where in your budget will you find the money to pay for the higher premiums? What programs and purchases will be adversely affected? Finally, what about the other costs? What about dealing with lawsuits? How about the added cost of overtime to cover a missing, injured employee? Or the costs associated with decreased productivity? Thus, the importance of requiring employees to follow work rules. I will now turn this over to Stacy for the next question. Stacy?
Thanks, Scott. Next on our list of most frequent questions to loss control is in regards to training. You've all gotten these types of questions as well. Why do I have to train? How long is this going to take? I already took this. Why do I have to take it again? If you're director, maybe you are asking yourself some of these questions. What training do I have to provide? How do I get these trainings done for myself and my employees? How do I keep track of what my employees need, what they have, and how often? I hope to give you a few insights into these dilemmas in the next few minutes. The types of training provided by an employer would be based in part on what exposures employees have. Consider each job task performed by employees. Each of those duties should have applicable training with documentation of completion with competency. These trainings should verify the employee knows how to perform that job task in a safe manner. Your day-to-day operations all require trainings. New employees should have onboarding in relation to all of the equipment you use and the safe way to operate it. Don't make assumptions that an employee knows how to safely perform a task, let alone use your specific equipment in a safe manner. Most employees can get the job done, but the key we try to drive home through training is performing it properly and safely to avoid acute as well as long-term injuries. Employers are responsible to offer employees training on all job duties. Have you done a hazard assessment on your programs? These are great tools to help you create your standard operating procedures for each task. From there, the SOPs give you a guideline as to the training that each employee should receive. Break them down into a step-by-step process and base your training around those steps. Your SOPs should be available to all employees easily for reference at any time. With many of the tasks not being performed daily, it is easy to forget the proper and safe procedure. How do you obtain training for your employees? Well, for existing programs and equipment, YouTube can be your best friend. Search for the specific manufacturer of your equipment and seek out training videos direct from them. If you are lucky, there was media that was enclosed with your equipment, and you can refer to it for onboarding and refreshers. In-person training, conferences, continuing education are a few of the options available. Daily tailgate talks are great for those last-minute reminders to all employees about their tasks for the day and the safe way to perform them. Online training is becoming more and more popular, especially in a COVID world. Included in your membership with IMWCA, you have access to our newly updated online platform called Learn. This new platform has over 300 course offerings and is absolutely free with your membership with us. As a member of IMWCA, you can add training classes to your entity's account for your employees' individualized training purposes. You can also draw generic training for more common operations from the available library. These range anywhere from trench safety to below 100, to anti-bullying, to slips, trips, and falls training. These offerings can be assigned to employees and even placed on a schedule to keep up with recurring training requirements. Training documentation should be completed for each participant and retained in a central location available upon request. One of the great perks of our system is that no matter what platform you choose to provide training to your employees, this system will house your training records. Classes taken within the system, whether generic or member specific, will have a certificate upon completion, and it will be stored with that employee's transcript. Even in-person classes can have a certificate created and added to that employee's transcript within the system. How impressed will your OSHA inspector be when you simply log on to the website instead of dragging out a dusty old binder? How often should we train? There are several factors that come into play when deciding how often to hold training. These will vary across tasks as well as each individual. OSHA has standards that we will go a little more in depth on here in a couple minutes. But additionally, there are several factors to consider when setting training standards for your entity. Training should be extensive for all new employees. OSHA requirements are simply a starting point. Your entity will have specific trainings that need to be completed. New employees should be trained on each SOP for any job duty they may perform. Many of these are most beneficial when combining the written SOP followed up by on-the-job training. In many circumstances, new employee training could take a year or more. And of course, training is never truly complete. Employers should be mindful of other circumstances where training could come into play. Anytime your organization changes an operation, equipment, or even a chemical. When you change the standard, all employees should be retrained using the new procedures. This training should be extensive enough to prove competency by the employee. No matter how similar the new equipment is, there is always room to retrain on even those steps that did not change. With the current times and ever-changing world of PPE, these are great opportunities to train and retrain your employees on proper usage. Anytime that a task is completed with teamwork, it is best to place those team members together during training to be sure of mutual understanding of the procedures. Don't forget your seasonal employees. Knowing that they don't need 100% of the same training as the full-time employees, there is a lot that can be forgotten between seasons. They will need training upon hire, and the same training would be applicable each year they return. Another final instance where training is indicated would be a near miss. We've all had those close calls, or what we in loss control call an incident only. Those are great opportunities for reminder training for not only the involved employees, but also for all that perform that task. Upon doing your incident review, whether you change procedure or not, there is a great opportunity for retraining all employees, reviewing your internal procedures for any updates that may need to be done, and again, making sure all employees understand the process and are comfortable with it. As for a training calendar, our website has a training planner matrix, as you can see on your screen. This offers a great starting point to developing a training calendar for your organization. The matrix gives you guidelines in accordance with OSHA standards. This would give you the bare minimum. One thing to note is that those tasks on an annual basis or even less frequent truly require more training than those performed daily. Our website also offers a training matrix as shown on your screen now. This is for documentation as to when your employees have taken training and how often it should be repeated. Remember, training is never truly complete, and safety is a mindset that can never have too many reminders. For the next question, I'll hand it over to Brad Chrisman. Take it away, Brad.
Thank you, Stacy. Great stuff. Next question that we had was, are local governments exempt from the seatbelt law? And the simple answer is no. If you look in the state statute under 321-445, states that if a vehicle is in motion, the driver and all occupants must have their seatbelt on. However, there is an exemption here. In 321-445B, it states that if the vehicle starts and stops and the front seat driver passenger are actively engaged in work that has them entering and exiting the vehicle at frequent intervals, as well as the vehicle is not exceeding 25 miles an hour between stops, they do not have to have their seatbelts on. However, we need to look at this a little bit closely, because what it basically states is that entering and exiting the vehicle frequently. That doesn't mean driving down to the water plant or over to the Casey's or down the lagoon or equipment shed is a routine or a route that you're taking. And that since you're under 25 miles an hour, you don't have to have your seatbelt on. An example of such entering and exiting a vehicle is like a garbage route or a mail carrier or some sort of a delivery driver. Those would be considered to be in the exemption. Cruising around town or traveling under 25 miles an hour to the equipment shed does not exempt you from wearing your seatbelt. Now, how many in here knew about the driver manual? The Safe Driver Manual we have on page 4 states that there's some questions and answers that can assist you that might be able to answer some of the questions that you have. One of the biggest questions that I've received is, well, why do we have to have a seatbelt policy? And that's a law. All employees are your most valuable resource in any agency. Understand that equipment can be replaced, a life cannot. So let's talk about the seatbelt policy. IMWCA model programs on seatbelts. You can get this policy at www.imwca.org in our model program section under the loss control tab. Number one, it helps manage the noncompliance instead of just waiting for the law enforcement officer to issue a ticket for noncompliance for the seatbelt. Number two, state law doesn't go and include anything with OTRs, such as side-by-side vehicles, specialized equipment, such as lawnmowers, graders, power industrial trucks. IMWCA policy does. If a manufacturer of a piece of equipment has a seatbelt safety system with rollover protection, the agency and the employee shall utilize those systems to protect them from being thrown off the machine and or ran over by the machine. I've handled 4 incidents from 2014 to 2017 in which it involved a piece of equipment such as a forklift where the driver was not wearing a seatbelt and they were seriously injured. You're not going to get thrown away from the travel of the vehicle. You're going to be thrown into its path. So please understand and please wear your seatbelts. Employees are also prohibited from riding in, on, or parts of the vehicle that are not designed for human occupancy. This includes, but is not limited to, the pickup truck boxes, the fenders, the bumpers. This also applies to trailers, ATVs, dump boxes, lift buckets, or forks. The cargo boxes, dump boxes, and lift buckets or forks are not equipped to hold people. It's for tools and things of that nature. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is how many of the 10 most recent auto fatalities have been due to not wearing a seatbelt. The correct answer is 9. 9 of the fatalities were not wearing seatbelts. That's not to mention the other people that were seriously injured due to not wearing their seatbelts as well. According to the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, in 2017, 37,133 people were killed in a motor vehicle crash. That's 47% of those that were not wearing a seatbelt. Folks, it just takes 2 seconds to go and put your seatbelt on. Another thing is what about the other guy that's out there on the roadway? Thing is that seatbelts help protect you from other drivers. Seatbelt is your best defense against impaired drunk drivers, aggressive drivers, and distracted drivers. It's not just you out there on the roadway. In the 20 years in law enforcement, I investigated crashes, persons that were in the second vehicle or the not at fault vehicle, and they didn't have their seatbelts on, and they were seriously injured or killed either by being ejected, partially ejected, or thrown around within the vehicle. And it caused serious injury and death. And if they had their seatbelts on, wouldn't have happened. Another thing is that seatbelt safety systems with the shoulder harness and lap belt is the most universal protective gear that a person can wear, and it doesn't take any training to go and wear it. Airbags are not enough to protect you in a crash. Airbags may even cause more injury with the velocity of the system that's going off and the driver and the front occupants not having seatbelts on. In today's vehicles, airbag systems are designed for the occupants to have their seatbelts on and the airbags to assist in the injury prevention. Airbag systems in modern vehicles are a supplemental safety feature. Occupants in these vehicles still need to wear their seatbelts as a primary protection in the event of a crash. Now, lastly, and certainly not least, we have had snow in the last couple of weeks. And ready or not, winter's coming. Are you sure you want to drive in fog, rain, snow, and ice storms without a seatbelt on? Remember IMWCA? They stated that 1,800 people die annually due to snow and icy pavement, and over 116,000 are seriously injured in these vehicle accidents from winter conditions that include icy and/or snow-packed roads. Remember, the ground's going to be frozen and it's going to be hard, along with the equipment or the vehicles operated. People are not as hard, and they can sustain serious injury or death if they are partially or fully ejected from the vehicles or the equipment that they're operating. That also includes the occupants that are in that vehicle as well. So please wear your seatbelts. Make sure that all occupants in the vehicles are wearing their seatbelts and that they're wearing them properly. Because proper wearing your seatbelt can be the life and death difference, and it only takes 2 seconds to make that decision. Now, we're going to go and turn it over to Dean, where he's going to talk about volunteer firefighters. Take it away, Dean.
Okay, thank you, Brad. So why do volunteer firefighters have to meet the IMWCA firefighter criteria? This is probably the number one question that IMWCA loss control staff gets from our cities is why do our firefighters have to follow these criteria? Before we get to the answer, there are a few things that we'll need to cover. Number one, the criteria I'm talking about are listed on our website under the loss control tab and under the firefighter program sub-tab. Number two, majority of the criteria, with the exception of the physicals and respiratory protection plan, are now covered by the Iowa Firefighter 1 standards. And by the way, the respiratory protection plan, if you are compensated as a firefighter, that may be required by OSHA. Number three, the criteria applies to both volunteer and paid firefighters. 2001 changed it all. To really understand why the criteria were developed, here's some historic perspective. Firefighter losses nationally have been poor for years, which is why the rate for firefighters is among the highest for work comp. However, in 2001, it was a watershed year for firefighter losses in the state of Iowa. There were 3 fatalities in the state, 2 by explosion and 1 by heart attack, making it one of the deadliest years for volunteer firefighters. For IMWCA, we had also had a number of heart attacks reported that year, 2 of which became very large claims. Additionally, we had had a higher than average number of large claims from pre-existing conditions. Other work comp insurers in the state were even having a rougher time with large firefighter losses. One work comp insurer went out of business and another company dumped 50 fire departments due to the poor loss history. Most of these canceled cities and standalone departments came to IMWCA for coverage. So given this environment, IMWCA faced 3 primary challenges. How do we reduce the injuries and illnesses to firefighters? How do we still provide affordable coverage? After all, large losses reduce fund balance and cause discounts for everyone to fall. And how do we ensure the preservation of the pool? After all, one insurer had already gone out of business. To address these challenges, IMWCA and a committee of volunteer fire chiefs developed the criteria and submitted them to the IMWCA board for approval. The criteria focused on the leading causes of injuries, the most hazardous tasks performed by volunteer firefighters, and best practices identified to control those hazards. Due to the serious nature of this risk, the criteria become the only loss control requirement that the IMWCA board has since adopted. So the question is, are the criteria working? Well, before the criteria were implemented, the pool paid out an average of $2.86 for every dollar that we earned in premium for firefighters. You don't stay in business very long when you have those kind of losses. However, since 2002, after the criteria were implemented, the pool has paid out an average of 75 cents per dollar of earned premium to break even. Given the low premium and high payout due to state laws, this is an accomplishment. The positive results have brought national attention to IMWCA, with several other state pools now implementing similar criteria. The biggest win, though, was not monetary. It was the reduction in severe injuries and fatalities that are reflected in these smaller claims. It means fewer people are getting hurt and not as severely. It's important to note that some of the largest firefighter claims that have occurred since implementation of the criteria have been situations where the criteria was either skirted by the department or they were seatbelt related. Heart attacks are the leading cause of fatalities for volunteer firefighters. We noted in a number of the fatality reports and autopsies that if the firefighter would have had a recent physical, the pre-existing condition would have been identified and could have prevented the death of the firefighter. Pre-existing conditions are the next largest source of claims: bad backs, bad shoulders, and respiratory issues, usually resulting from previous job injury or firefighter injuries incurred with other jurisdictions. In some cases, the firefighter was actually on disability from their full-time job, and they were still responding to calls without telling the chief when the aggravation occurred. In several of the claims, doctors told our claims examiners that re-injury was imminent due to the condition of the firefighter. Again, physicals could have discovered the condition and helped prevent that re-injury. The overall goal of the physicals is to help the department identify who has what restrictions and in what positions can they be placed where they can contribute safely to the department. Only in a small number of cases has a person failed the physical and been unable to continue as an active firefighter. With respect to how the committee selected the physicals, it was determined that the NFPA physicals were too expensive for most agencies, and DOT physicals do not sufficiently cover cardiopulmonary testing. So the committee, working with health providers, identified an affordable compromise that covers what we need to know. With that, I'll now turn it over to Scott Smith for the final question. Scott?
Thank you, Dean. We often get asked questions about what are our most common types of claims, and we'd like to go through some of those with you today. Slips, trips, and falls account for 25% of frequency, the number of claims, and severity of our claims. These are leading losses and in many cases can be prevented. So how can we work to prevent these claims? It's critical to stress to your employees to wear proper footwear for the job they're taking on and the weather conditions they're working in. Encourage your employees to slow down. Don't run, even if you're late for work. If you're late for work, you run, you fall down, which has happened. Now you're late for work and hurt. It's not worth it. We all need to keep our eyes on the path. Don't become distracted when you're walking. And carry less. Make more trips. Use the elevator instead of the stairs. Is there a cart you can use to carry stuff? Use ladders and step stools. Please, absolutely do not use chairs. We do not want to see folks using chairs and desks to climb up and reach things. But when using ladders and step stools, know your limitations. Do not overextend. And in fact, now would be a great time to conduct ladder safety training since we're coming up on holidays, where a lot of offices do decorating to celebrate those holidays. And again, these claims are preventable. Another category of claims that we see a high frequency of are strains. And this is due to lifting, reaching, and twisting. These claims often impact shoulders, lower backs, and knees. And these injuries can require extensive medical care and recovery time. And unfortunately, they're often very painful. Oftentimes, it's difficult for the injured employee to make a full recovery. So now they've incurred a quality of life injury. So how do we prevent these? Take the time to properly size up your tasks. Don't let your ego overwhelm your capabilities. For example, are more people needed? Is there equipment that can aid in the task? Look around, take that time to size it up. And again, many of these are also preventable. Vehicle collisions. This has been a issue for many, many years and only seems to be getting worse. Distracted driving is an increasing threat, resulting in more claims. And it's not just from the other drivers, the other guy. Our pool employees are driving distracted as well. Not too long ago, we had a fatality in a single vehicle accident due to the driver using a laptop while driving. Driving too fast is a hazard, both from folks that are driving around us going too fast, but also if we drive too fast. It's bad enough when other drivers speed and cause driving hazards, but we need to slow down as well. We see claims due to employees not wearing seatbelts. When they get in a vehicle collision, as Brad mentioned, they often compound their injuries due to the fact that they are not belted in. So please wear the seatbelt. As Brad stated, it only takes a couple seconds to click it. Cuts, punctures, and scrapes are a common type of claim, and many of these are preventable. These claims are due to employees possibly not wearing their personal protective equipment, such as gloves, eye protection, head protection, and appropriate footwear. It's important that managers and supervisors lead by example and also wear their required personal protective equipment. An effective way to foster PPE use is to use ongoing reminders about what PPE needs are required on the job, and do the employees have that when they start the job. Talk about it on a tailgate talk just before you go out for a project. When you're out and about and you observe your employees, if you see them not wearing their PPE, bring it up. Tell them to stop, go get their PPE, and then they can continue the work. Wearing PPE can reduce injuries, or at least their severity, and that is key. I'm now going to turn it back over to Dean Shady.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Are there any questions that you may have on any of these topics that we have covered?
How do you how do you form a safety committee?
Forming a safety committee really depends on the entity. There's factors of how many departments that you have, who has an interest in serving on the committee. But perhaps the best way that I would recommend would be to get a representative from each of the major departments and establish a agenda. Also establish a consistent meeting time. So for example, 9 o'clock every morning or every Wednesday, third Wednesday of the month would be a good idea. And, you know, again, with the agenda, make sure that we cover things like incident review. What are the hazards coming up? Is there anything anybody else would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think, Dean, you said having an established time every month is very important. And also maybe define the time it's going to be. We found a lot of our members will limit the safety committee meeting to an hour. It helps you stay focused on the task at hand, and it helps people plan the rest of their day.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Should the elected officials be involved in the safety committee process, or do they need to get reports?
It's a positive when you can get an elected official to be part of the safety committee. However, that's not always an option. In the event that you cannot get an elected involved in the committee or available for the committee, then we recommend that you always provide the council, the board or board of trustees with copies of the committee meetings to keep them apprised of what's going on. Anything anybody else would like to add to that? Okay, next question.
What is the best way to, if you don't already have a training process or a training schedule, what's the best way to get that started for your employees?
Stacy, would you like to weigh in on that one, please?
Well, like we mentioned in our program, when you're trying to get a program started, the best bet would be to analyze, again, your job duties that your employees perform on a routine basis, and even those that are more rare as well. And a good starting point, if you're looking for something documented, again, we have those two reference materials, our training planner matrix and the training matrix, both online would be great starting points. But again, the best thing you can do is analyze your own job duties, do a hazard analysis on what your employees, the duties they perform, and kind of do a step-by-step process for them from there.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
So you gave us the top 5 questions. What would be your number 6 or the one closest that you get asked the most?
Scott, Stacy, or Brad, there's any that you get
I
the
would say
most?
ones we get is, or that I personally get, is the our return to work program. Why and what does it do for us?
Okay, Brad?
I'd agree with that. I'd also say that a lot of questions that I get is structure on a safety meeting and involvement of people in a safety meeting, because a lot of times when people go to these safety meetings, what they like to do is just sit there and not really get too involved in it. And on a safety committee, you definitely want to have the involvement from everybody and the input from everybody. So that way there's the communications between departments to say if it worked training wise on one department, it could possibly work training wise in another department. Take for instance, like slips, trips, and falls, and like a water department, they're having many of them, and then they're starting to have an uptick on them. In another department, they can say, well, this worked for us on this sort of thing. Are we wearing our grips? Are we taking advantage of the proper PPE that we're doing? So those are a couple of things that I've been getting questions on.
Okay.
And
Scott?
I'd just like to add, get questions about incident review. You know, and that's something that we stress, that you be prepared to do that. But if something does come up, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to your loss control rep. We'll help walk you through how to, you know, look at what happened so you can learn from it. Are there any lessons learned that you can put into practice so that that type of injury and incident doesn't reoccur?
And I'd have to concur, incident review and return to work are probably the neck and neck with the next question, most common questions that I receive. Any other questions from our members?
I don't see any other questions.
Okay. With that, I'd like to again thank everybody for taking time today to be with us on this presentation, and we look forward to hopefully next year seeing you in person. And until then, have a safe day and have a safe year. Thank you.